The Galactic Defense Coordination had attempted every known method of combating the Scourge. Biological weapons designed to target their unique cellular structure had failed because the Scourge simply incorporated the attacking pathogens into their own biology. Nanotechnology warfare backfired spectacularly when the Scourge consumed the nanites and learned to produce their own technological defenses. Even the experimental quantum disruption weapons that could theoretically unravel matter at the subatomic level proved ineffective. The Scourge had somehow developed a resistance to quantum destabilization, something that should have been physically impossible according to every scientific model the galaxy possessed. The military situation was equally grim. Combined fleet actions involving dozens of species fighting in perfect coordination had managed to slow the Scourge advance in some sectors, but never stop it completely. The organism simply evolved new tactics, new forms, new methods of attack that exploited every weakness in the defensive formations. Worse, each battle fed the Scourge more biomass from fallen soldiers and destroyed ships. They were literally growing stronger from every encounter, turning the galaxy's defenders into fuel for their expansion. High Chancellor Thex of the Avian Ascendancy spread his magnificent wings, the purple and gold feathers catching the light from the holographic display. His species had fought the Scourge longer than most, losing 3 colony worlds in the process. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had watched billions of his people die despite every effort to save them. He outlined the mathematical projections that the best strategic minds in the galaxy had calculated. At the current rate of expansion, the Scourge would consume the entire galactic civilization within 18 months. Not defeat it or conquer it, but literally consume every living thing in every populated system. The silence that followed his announcement was absolute. In the upper observation gallery, far from the main floor, 3 humans sat quietly and watched the proceeding. Commander Sarah Mitchell of the United Earth Space Command maintained a neutral expression, but her mind was racing through tactical assessments and strategic possibilities. To her left, Captain Marcus Chen studied the holographic displays with the intense focus of a career military officer analyzing enemy capabilities. On her right, Dr. Imara Okonkwo, Earth's foremost xenobiologist, was already making notes on her tablet about the Scourge's biological characteristics. Earth had been part of the Galactic Unity Forum for only 15 years, and in that time, humanity had been treated with a mixture of fascination and fear by the other species, Epusum. When the first alien contact had occurred, Earth's scientists and diplomats had been overjoyed to discover they were not alone in the universe. That joy had quickly turned to confusion when they realized how the other species viewed them. Humans came from what the galaxy classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most hostile planetary environments known to produce intelligent life. Earth's gravity was higher than the galactic average, its atmosphere more corrosive, its weather patterns more violent, its tectonic activity more severe, and its biological ecosystem more aggressively competitive than 97% of habitable worlds. Humanity had evolved in an environment that constantly tried to kill them, and it showed in every aspect of their biology and psychology. Humans were stronger, faster, more durable, and far more aggressive than almost every other spacefaring species. They had redundant organs, rapid healing capabilities, and an immune system so robust it treated most alien pathogens as minor inconveniences. What truly unsettled the other species was not humanity's physical capabilities, but their psychological ones. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters who could chase prey for days without stopping. They had developed pack bonding so strong they would die for individuals not even related to them. Their capacity for violence was matched only by their capacity for compassion, and they seemed to have no middle ground between the two extremes. Other species fought wars when necessary, but humans had refined warfare into an art form. They studied it, practiced it, glorified it in their entertainment, prepared for it constantly, even during times of peace. The Galactic Unity Forum had granted Earth observer status primarily because refusing them might have been more dangerous than including them. Humanity had been carefully monitored, their expansion into their own solar system watched with nervous attention by intelligence services from a dozen species. What those intelligence services discovered had not been reassuring. Humans had militarized their moon, built weapons platforms on Mars, established mining operations in the asteroid belt that could easily be converted to military production, and developed spacecraft propulsion systems that violated several safety regulations because they were simply too powerful and too dangerous. When asked why they needed such extensive military preparations, the human response had been simple and terrifying: just in case. Now, as Ambassador Velron's presentation concluded with a final, desperate plea for any ideas or assistance the forum could provide, Commander Mitchell felt the attention of the entire chamber slowly turning toward the observation gallery where the humans sat. She had known this moment would come eventually. The other species might fear humanity's violent nature and their death world origins, but when faced with an enemy that threatened extinction, even fear could be overcome by necessity. Velron's crystalline body turned toward the human delegation, and his voice carried clearly through the quantum resonators. He spoke with the formality that galactic protocol demanded, but underneath was raw desperation that needed no translation. He acknowledged Earth's observer status and humanity's relatively recent entry into galactic society. He spoke carefully about the differences between human culture and the more peaceful philosophies of the established civilizations. And then he did something unprecedented in forum history. He asked humanity directly for help. The request sent shockwaves through the assembly. Several species began broadcasting objections immediately. The Harmony Collective, a telepathic species that valued peace above all else, transmitted concerns about introducing humanity's violent tendencies into an already desperate situation. The logic concorded: beings of pure reason who existed as energy patterns in specialized containment fields, calculated the probability that humans might prove more dangerous than the scourge itself. Even some of humanity's closer diplomatic partners, species that had established trade relationships with Earth, expressed reservations about what might happen if humans were given full authorization to act militarily. But Velron was not finished. He brought up new displays showing the projected casualty rates if the scourge continued unchecked. Trillions would die. Entire species would be driven to extinction. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years would vanish as if they had never been. The mathematical certainty of total galactic extinction hung in the air like a death sentence. In the face of that reality, Velron argued, what choice did they have? If there was even a chance that humanity's unique perspective on warfare, their death world adaptations, their seemingly insane willingness to sacrifice everything for a cause they believed in, if any of that could make a difference, then they had to try. Commander Mitchell stood slowly, her movement drawing every eye and sensor in the massive chamber. She was tall even by human standards, her dark skin marked with scars from a dozen conflicts on Earth before humanity had achieved global unity. Her uniform was simple compared to the elaborate garments worn by many alien dignitaries, but it carried an authority that needed no decoration. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, showing none of the emotion she felt inside. She thanked Ambassador Velron for his presentation and acknowledged the severity of the situation. She noted that Earth had been monitoring the scourge situation through public information channels and had been conducting their own analysis of the threat. What she did not mention was that human intelligence services had been gathering far more detailed information than what was publicly available, using methods that would probably violate several forum regulations if anyone knew about them. She explained that a decision of this magnitude required consultation with Earth's unified government, as humanity took the responsibility of military action very seriously. Captain Shen leaned close and whispered that the nearest scourge forces were only 3 weeks from reaching the outer colonies, some of the forum's most densely populated regions. Mitchell nodded and adjusted her timeline accordingly. She informed the assembly that Earth would provide an answer within 1 week. In the meantime, she requested full access to all available data on the scourge, including classified military records, scientific analyses, and any experimental weapons or tactics that had been attempted. She also requested permission for human ships to begin moving toward the threatened sectors, purely for observation purposes, of course. The formal vote to grant Earth's requests took less than an hour, an unprecedented speed for the forum's usually ponderous decision-making process. As the human delegation prepared to leave, heading for the docking bay where their ship waited, Velrun approached them privately. Up close, his crystalline structure showed hairline fractures from stress, something that would take months to heal for his species. He spoke quietly, his translated words reaching only the three humans. He told them that he had studied Earth's history after first contact, something not many other ambassadors had bothered to do. He had read about humanity's world wars, their struggles against disease and famine, their constant battles against their own environment just to survive. He had learned about human concepts like honor, sacrifice, and the willingness to die for strangers. He admitted that these concepts frightened him, that humanity's capacity for violence disturbed him on a fundamental level. But he also admitted that his people were going to die if something did not change. His civilization, millions of years old, would be consumed and forgotten. So he was asking not as an ambassador, but as someone who had watched his home world's children being evacuated while knowing many would not escape in time. He was asking if Earth's violence, if humanity's death world nature, if all the things that made other species fear them, could possibly save those who remained. Mitchell's response was simple. She placed her hand on Velrun's crystalline shoulder, a gesture of comfort that her species had refined over millennia, of consoling one another. She told him that humans did not like bullies, did not tolerate those who preyed on the innocent, and had a very specific response to threats against civilians. She told him to prepare the forum for what was coming, because if Earth decided to help, they would not do it halfway. Humanity had spent 15 years being the quiet observer, the scary newcomers that everyone watched nervously. If they were going to act, the galaxy was about to learn what Deathworlders were truly capable of when they stopped holding back. The human ship departed the forum station with minimal ceremony, accelerating toward Earth with an urgency that surprised the traffic controllers monitoring the departure. What they did not know was that Commander Mitchell had sent an encrypted message ahead of her arrival. The message contained only 3 words, but those words set in motion preparations that had been planned for years. The message read, "Activate Prometheus Protocol." Across the Sol system, hidden bases began powering up. On the dark side of Luna, massive hangar doors that had been disguised as crater walls started opening for the first time since their construction. In the asteroid belt, mining stations that had always seemed slightly too large and too well armed for civilian operations began reconfiguring themselves. On Mars, beneath the polar ice caps, facilities that officially did not exist received the activation codes they had been waiting for. Humanity had spent 15 years preparing for the possibility that they might need to fight for their place in the galaxy. They had built weapons, trained soldiers, developed strategies, and created contingency plans for scenarios ranging from alien invasion to total galactic war. Now those preparations were about to be put to use, not to conquer or dominate, but to protect. Because that was what humans did. They protected the weak, defended the innocent, and fought against those who threatened people who could not fight for themselves. The Scourge had killed trillions of beings who had never done anything except try to live their lives in peace. They had consumed children, destroyed cultures, and erased histories that stretched back millions of years. They thought they were unstoppable, that their ability to adapt and evolve made them the apex predators of the galaxy. They had never encountered a species from a death world. They had never faced an enemy that had been adapting and evolving in one of the harshest environments in the known galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years. They had never fought humans who were angry, who had decided that something was worth dying for, who had looked at impossible odds and said not today. The Scourge was about to receive an education in why other species feared Deathworlders, and it was going to be a lesson written in fire and fury across the stars. The Deathworld Armada, the emergency session of the United Earth Command, took place in Geneva, deep beneath the mountains in a facility that could survive a direct nuclear strike. Representatives from every nation, every major military force, and every scientific institution sat around the circular command table. Above them, holographic displays showed the Scourge's advance, the forum's failed defensive efforts, and projections of what would happen if the alien threat was not stopped. The mood was grim but determined. Humanity had faced extinction events before, fought wars that threatened their entire species, and survived disasters that should have ended civilization. This was simply another challenge, albeit on a galactic scale. General Rebecca O'Caffer of the African Federation stood first, her uniform bearing decorations from conflicts across 3 continents. She had been one of the architects of the Prometheus Protocol, the secret plan for rapid military mobilization that had been developed shortly after first contact with alien civilizations. She outlined the situation with brutal honesty. The Scourge represented an existential threat not just to the Galactic Forum but to humanity itself. If the other species fell, Earth would eventually face the Scourge alone. Better to fight now, with allies and away from human space, than to wait until the enemy arrived at their doorstep. Admiral James Park of the Pacific Fleet activated additional displays showing Earth's hidden military capabilities. The room fell silent as the true extent of humanity's preparations became clear. For 15 years, while maintaining the appearance of peaceful exploration and limited self-defense capabilities, Earth had been building an armada. The shipyards on Luna were just the beginning. Mars hosted 3 separate military-industrial complexes capable of producing everything from small fighters to massive capital ships. The asteroid belt contained not just mining operations but weapons, foundries, ammunition depots, and training facilities for zero-gravity combat. Even the outer system had been militarized, with Jupiter's moons hosting long-range sensor arrays and Neptune's orbit containing experimental weapons platforms. The fleet composition was staggering. Earth had constructed over 8,000 dedicated warships, each designed with lessons learned from studying alien technology and improving upon it with human engineering. There were fast attack corvettes built for hit-and-run operations, destroyers equipped with experimental railguns that could fire projectiles at relativistic speeds, cruisers carrying enough firepower to level continents, and massive battleships that served as mobile fortresses. Beyond the conventional vessels were the specialist units, stealth ships that could approach undetected, assault carriers designed to deliver troops directly into hostile environments, and support vessels carrying everything from field hospitals to mobile repair docks. Dr. Heinrich Müller, head of the Weapons Development Division, presented the arsenal that had been created specifically for scenarios like this. Humanity had not just built bigger versions of alien weapons, they had innovated in directions that other species considered too dangerous or too unethical. There were kinetic bombardment systems that could accelerate tungsten rods to speeds that made them effectively unstoppable. Plasma weapons that burned hot enough to melt through any known armor. Nuclear-pumped lasers that could only be fired once before destroying themselves but delivered enough energy to cut through capital ships. And those were just the conventional options. The experimental weapons were far more disturbing. Humanity had developed biological warfare agents designed to target specific cellular structures, though these remained sealed and classified as last resort options. They had created artificial intelligence, guided swarm missiles that could make tactical decisions independently and coordinate attacks across entire battle spaces. They had even experimented with weaponizing the very things that made Earth a death world. Engineering microorganisms from Earth's deep oceans that could survive in vacuum and consume organic matter, essentially fighting fire with fire against the Scourge's biological nature. Captain Maria Santos from the Special Operations Command addressed the elephant in the room. How humans fought differently from other species. She displayed footage from historical human conflicts, showing tactics that made several of the alien observers in the room visibly uncomfortable. Humans did not fight for territory control or resource acquisition in the methodical way other species did. When threatened or protecting something they cared about, humans fought with a totality that bordered on insanity. They used their own bodies as weapons when necessary, sacrificed valuable equipment if it meant completing objectives, and maintained aggression even when facing certain death. The psychological aspect of human warfare was perhaps most disturbing to alien sensibilities. Humanity had concepts like scorched earth policies, where they would destroy their own resources rather than let an enemy have them. They practiced suicide tactics when the situation demanded it, with individuals volunteering to give their lives if it meant saving others. They had developed entire philosophies around the idea of acceptable losses and necessary sacrifices. Most alien species would retreat and regroup when casualties reached 10%. Human forces had historically fought to the last soldier in defensive actions and continued attacking with 50% casualties in offensive operations. The debate that followed was surprisingly brief. Every representative understood what was being asked of them. Committing to help the Galactic Forum meant potentially spending human lives and resources on a war that was not directly threatening Earth yet, but it also meant establishing humanity as a protector species, earning the gratitude and cooperation of hundreds of civilizations, and positioning Earth as a major power in galactic politics. More importantly, for many in the room, it was simply the right thing to do. The Scourge had killed trillions of innocent beings. If humanity had the capability to stop that, they had the responsibility to try. The vote was unanimous. Earth would intervene. General Okafor immediately activated the Prometheus Protocol, sending encrypted commands to every military installation in the Sol system. Within hours, the secret shipyards began releasing vessels that had been held in reserve. Mars's military complexes went to full production, churning out munitions and supplies around the clock. Training facilities activated long-prepared battalions of Marines who had been drilling for years for combat in hostile environments. The entire human military machine, built over 15 years of careful preparation, roared to life. Commander Mitchell was given overall command of what was designated the Terran Expeditionary Force. Her orders were simple: stop the Scourge advance, protect Forum civilians, and demonstrate that humanity was a force for stability in the galaxy. How she accomplished those objectives was left to her discretion, which was exactly how she preferred it. She assembled her command staff, pulling the best tactical minds from every branch of Earth's military. Captain Chen would serve as her second-in-command and chief tactical officer. Dr. Okonkwo would lead the science division, focusing on understanding and countering the Scourge's biological adaptations. Major Thomas Reeves, a grizzled veteran of the resource wars, would command the ground forces if boarding actions or planetary operations became necessary. The Terran Expeditionary Force assembled in orbit around Mars, using the red planet's bulk to shield their numbers from casual observation. Mitchell had decided against trying to hide their strength. The Forum needed to see what humanity could bring to the fight, and the Scourge needed to understand that they faced an enemy unlike anything they had encountered before. The fleet formed up in battle groups, each designed to operate independently while maintaining overall coordination. The formation was deliberately different from the standard alien military doctrines, emphasizing flexibility and rapid response over rigid command structures. As the fleet prepared for departure, Mitchell addressed her forces via ship-wide communications. She spoke plainly, without the flowery rhetoric that alien commanders often employed. She told them that they were about to fight an enemy that had defeated every military force in the galaxy. She acknowledged that casualties would be high and that some of them would not return home. But she also reminded them why they were going. Trillions of beings had already died, beings who had families and dreams and lives they wanted to live. The Scourge had taken all of that away, reduced thinking, feeling creatures to nothing more than biomass for their expansion.
Ian.
If humanity could stop that, if they could save even a fraction of those who remained, then the sacrifice would be worth it. The response from the fleet was immediate and fierce. 8,000 ships powered their engines and began the journey toward the threatened sector. They traveled in formations that confused the alien traffic controllers, monitoring their departure, constantly shifting positions and practicing tactical maneuvers as they went. What looked like chaos to alien observers was actually carefully orchestrated flexibility. Each ship's captain trained to make independent decisions while maintaining awareness of the larger battle plan. This was how humans had always fought, not as rigid formations following predetermined patterns, but as coordinated individuals adapting to rapidly changing circumstances. The journey took 4 days at maximum sustainable speed. During that time, Dr. Okonkwo's science teams worked around the clock analyzing every piece of data available on the Scourge. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and horrifying. The scourge was not a single species but a collective of adapted organisms that had likely started as a simple parasitic life form millions of years ago. Over time, through countless generations and exposure to different environments, it had evolved into something far more complex. Individual scourge organisms were relatively simple, but they networked together through biological quantum entanglement, creating a distributed intelligence that grew more sophisticated as their numbers increased. This explained their remarkable adaptability. When one scourge organism encountered a new threat and survived long enough to adapt, that adaptation was instantly shared across the entire collective. Kill a scourge unit with fire, and within hours all scourge units in the sector would have developed heat resistance. Use a specific chemical weapon, and they would evolve immunity before the second deployment. The Forum's forces had been fighting an enemy that learned from every engagement and never forgot a lesson. It was, as Dr. Okonkwo grimly noted, evolution weaponized and accelerated to military timeframes. But evolution had limitations, especially when facing something truly novel. The Scourge had adapted to every weapon system the Forum possessed because those weapons were based on principles the Scourge had encountered before. Energy, chemicals, radiation, even quantum manipulation. These were all things that existed in nature, and that the Scourge's evolutionary pressures had equipped them to eventually overcome. What they had never encountered was technology and tactics from a species that had evolved in a completely different environmental context. Earth's unique conditions had driven human innovation in directions that were uncommon, or even unique in the galaxy. Major Reeves proposed the core tactical philosophy that would guide their engagement: controlled chaos combined with overwhelming violence of action. The Scourge adapted to patterns, so human forces would avoid patterns entirely. They would attack from multiple vectors simultaneously, use contradictory tactics in the same engagement, and switch weapons systems seemingly at random. The goal was not to prevent adaptation, but to make adaptation impossible by never giving the Scourge time to understand what they were adapting to before the situation changed again. The fleet received its first test before reaching the primary battle zone. Long-range sensors detected a Scourge scouting force investigating an abandoned mining facility in the Threshold system. The facility had been evacuated when the Scourge advance began, but it still contained valuable equipment and supplies. Mitchell decided to use the encounter as both a combat test and a demonstration. She ordered 3 battle groups, approximately 1,200 ships, to engage while the rest of the fleet observed and prepared. The engagement began with a tactic that seemed insane to any alien military doctrine: ramming speed. The human ships accelerated directly toward the Scourge concentration, without firing a single weapon. The Scourge organisms, numbering in the millions and ranging from small fighter equivalents to massive capital ship-sized monstrosities, prepared to meet what they assumed was a desperate charge. Their previous encounters had taught them that most species would break off at the last moment or attempt boarding actions at low speeds. The humans did neither. At maximum velocity, the lead wave of human ships opened fire with every kinetic weapon they possessed. Railguns fired solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Rotary cannons spewed thousands of rounds per second. Missile pods launched swarms of high-explosive warheads. And then, just as the Scourge began adapting to the kinetic barrage, the human ships did something unexpected. They detonated their own nuclear reactors in controlled explosions, timed to maximize the damage to surrounding Scourge units. 50 ships deliberately destroyed themselves in the opening seconds of the engagement, taking out thousands of Scourge organisms in nuclear fireballs that lit up the void. The Scourge collective intelligence processed this action and found it incomprehensible. No species deliberately destroyed valuable military assets as an opening move. Certainly no species did so with such precision and obvious planning. Before they could adapt to the new threat profile, the second wave of human ships arrived. These vessels carried different weapons, firing plasma that superheat the local environment to temperatures that vaporized organic matter. The Scourge began developing heat resistance, their organism's cellular structure shifting to dissipate thermal energy more effectively. Then the third wave arrived with cryoweapons, flash freezing entire sections of space. Scourge units that had just adapted to extreme heat found themselves unable to cope with extreme cold. Their distributed intelligence tried to process both adaptations simultaneously, but the contradictory requirements slowed their response. Human ships exploited the confusion ruthlessly, targeting the larger Scourge command organisms that coordinated local activities. Without these nodes, the smaller units became less organized, their attack patterns degrading from coordinated strikes to individual aggression. Major Reeves launched the boarding parties. Human Marines, equipped with powered armor designed to operate in hostile environments that would kill unprotected humans in seconds, breached the larger Scourge organisms that had formed organic ship equivalents. The fighting inside was brutal in close quarters, exactly the kind of combat that humans had been perfecting for thousands of years. The Scourge adapted quickly to the boarding actions, evolving specialized defensive units that could fight in the narrow confines. But they had never encountered an enemy that viewed close combat as an acceptable military tactic against a numerically superior foe. The Marines used weapons that would have horrified the Forum's more peaceful species, flamethrowers that turned corridors into infernos, explosives that brought down entire sections of organic ships, close combat weapons that ranged from molecular blade knives to simple clubs for when ammunition ran out. And throughout it all, the humans maintained constant communication, coordinating their attacks and supporting each other with a pack-bonding instinct that made them far more effective than their individual capabilities suggested. When one Marine fell, others immediately moved to cover their position. When supplies ran low, teams shared resources without hesitation. The Scourge fought as a collective intelligence directing individual units. Humans fought as individuals who chose to work together, and that distinction made all the difference. The engagement lasted 6 hours. By the end, the Scourge scouting force had been completely eliminated. The cost to human forces was significant. 83 ships destroyed, another 100 damaged, and over 2,000 casualties among the boarding parties. But they had proven something crucial. The Scourge could be beaten. Their adaptation abilities had limits when faced with truly chaotic and unpredictable tactics. More importantly, humanity had demonstrated that they were willing to pay the butcher's bill that defeating the Scourge required. Mitchell immediately transmitted the full battle data to the Galactic Forum. She included detailed analyses of what had worked, what had not, and recommendations for how Forum forces might adapt their own tactics. The response was swift and varied. Some species expressed horror at human casualties and the deliberate destruction of valuable ships. Others noted the effectiveness of the tactics with grudging respect. A few, like Ambassador Velrun, simply transmitted thanks for the proof that the Scourge was not invincible. Just was not invincible. But Mitchell was already moving to the next phase. Scouting force had been a test. The real challenge lay ahead in the Threshold system's inner worlds, where a major Scourge concentration was preparing to assault the heavily populated colonies of the outer reaches. Intelligence suggested over 50 billion Scourge organisms were gathering for the attack. Forum forces had been evacuating civilians for weeks, but millions remained trapped by lack of transport or inability to flee. If the Scourge reached those colonies, the death toll would be catastrophic. The Terran Expeditionary Force had 4 days to prepare. Dr. Okonkwo's teams worked with captured Scourge specimens to understand their cellular structure better. They discovered that the organism's rapid adaptation came at a cost. They required enormous amounts of energy and resources to maintain their distributed intelligence network. Disrupt that network or starve it of resources, and the Scourge became significantly less dangerous. Engineering teams immediately began developing weapons specifically designed to target the biological quantum entanglement that connected Scourge units. Captain Chen planned the battle strategy using every unconventional tactic humanity had ever developed. The goal was not to defeat the Scourge in a direct engagement, but to disrupt their coordination so completely that they could not mount an effective assault on the colonies. He proposed a strategy he called the Swarm Breaker. Simultaneous attacks on multiple Scourge concentration points using rapidly rotating tactics that would force the collective intelligence to split its attention. While the Scourge was distracted, special operations teams would infiltrate the largest organism clusters and deploy weapons designed to sever their quantum connections. Major Reeves trained his Marines for what he called the suicide runs, though that name was officially discouraged. These were high-risk insertion missions into the heart of Scourge concentrations, delivering payloads that could disrupt the network. The volunteers who stepped forward numbered in the thousands. Every single one understood that survival was unlikely. Every single one volunteered anyway, because that was what humans did when innocent lives hung in the balance. As the fleet moved into final positions, Mitchell received a private communication from Ambassador Valren. The crystalline diplomat's message was brief but profound. He informed her that forum observers had been monitoring the engagement with the Scourge scouting force. The footage had been shared with the broader galactic community. Reactions ranged from horror to admiration, but one thing was clear. Humanity had changed how the galaxy viewed the war. For the first time since the Scourge had appeared, species that had been preparing to flee were now reconsidering. If Deathworlders could fight these monsters and win, perhaps there was hope. Valren's message concluded with a simple request. Show the Scourge that they are not the apex predators they believe themselves to be. Show them that evolution did not stop with them. Show them that the galaxy has teeth. Mitchell smiled grimly as she read those words. Oh, she intended to do exactly that. The Scourge had evolved to consume all organic life in their path. They had adapted to every threat they encountered. They thought themselves unstoppable. They had never met a species that had spent hundreds of thousands of years surviving on a world that tried to kill them every single day. They had never faced Deathworlders who had looked at their own hostile planet and said, "We will not just survive, we will thrive." The Battle of Threshold was about to begin, and the Scourge was about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity. Humans did not win by being stronger or faster or more advanced. Humans won by being more stubborn, more adaptable, and more willing to sacrifice everything for those who could not fight for themselves. The galaxy had asked for help from Deathworlders. Now the galaxy would see what that truly meant. Commander Mitchell gave the order that would echo through galactic history. All ships advance. Show them why Earth is classified as a death world. Show them what happens when you threaten the innocent. Show them that humanity has arrived, and we do not lose. 8,000 ships surged forward toward 50 billion hostile organisms. The odds were mathematically impossible. The casualties would be catastrophic. Victory was uncertain, and not a single human ship hesitated, because this was what Deathworlders did. They faced impossible odds and fought anyway. The Scourge was about to receive an education in why the rest of the galaxy feared humanity. And it was going to be a lesson they would never forget, written in fire and determination across the stars. The age of humanity's quiet observation was over. The galaxy would never be the same.